Transformation does not happen by chance. It happens by choice. And every single day, each and every one of us has the power and the capability to choose what our lives are going to be. So if you find yourselves in a situation that's less than ideal, if you find yourself repeating the same types of behaviors, if you find yourselves in the same type of relationships with the same kinds of people, then it might be time for you to start making a different choice. And on this week's episode of the Empowerment Hour podcast, we're going to be talking about the many ways we self-sabotage ourselves and some of the things we can do to start making different choices. So sit back, grab yourself a pen and pad so that you can jot down some notes. And when I get back, we're going to get into this week's topic. You are tuned in to the Empowerment Hour podcast, your digital global classroom where individuals across all ages, backgrounds, and career levels tune in for guidance and motivation to live life on their own terms. It's where inspiring thought leaders, modern-day influencers, and social game changers come to discuss their own personal journeys and have real conversations about the journey to success. I am your host, Nancy Ruffin, and every week I bring you raw and unfiltered conversations about the obstacles we all encounter, the times we felt like giving up, and the things that keep us forging forward. It's where passion and purpose intersect. So if you're ready to start living on purpose, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, my loves. Thank you guys for tuning in to another week of the Empowerment Hour podcast. You know who it is. It is your girl, Nancy Ruffin. And this week, we're going to be talking about the many ways we self-sabotage ourselves. But before we get into the main topic of the conversation, I kind of just wanted to regroup, kind of catch you guys up on some of the things that have been happening in my life for the past 2 weeks. Because those of you who are loyal listeners, you know that I didn't publish a new episode last week. It was just so much going on. I had my third strategic visioning workshop last Sunday, and by the time I got home, I was exhausted. There was no way that I had any energy left to sit down and record the podcast, and for that I apologize, because I really do try my best to be consistent and to be committed to the agreement that I have made with you all by simply taking up space in this podcast industry. You know, one of the things that I always stress, either with my clients or in my workshops, is that we have to be accountable to those who support us, those who believe in us, those who consistently tune in for the content that we provide them. And so we have an unwritten contract, just simply because you tune in every week. And because you do that, then I have a responsibility to you to make sure that you have a new episode to listen to every week. And so I didn't hold up my end of the bargain last week. And again, I apologize. But cut me some slack. I'm human. I am allowed to get tired and to be exhausted. And I want you all to take this as an example of practicing your own form of self-care. You have to know when you're supposed to be pushing yourself, but you also have to pay attention and be aware of what your body is telling you and what your body is asking from you. And for me, last week, I needed rest. And so this is kind of like what my girl Stephanie Fuentes says. Sometimes you have to say no to others so that you can say yes to yourself. And if you have not tuned in to her bi-weekly podcast, the I Said No podcast, I encourage you to do so. It is a brilliant podcast that is really focused on helping people set healthy boundaries in their lives. It's about being okay with saying no and not feeling guilty about that. And so it's okay to say no sometimes. It's okay to even say no to yourself when you know you've made a commitment to yourself and you're struggling with whether to keep that or to break it. Only you can answer that question. Only you know how far you can push yourself. And so you never want to push yourself to the breaking point. So even if you have made a commitment with yourself and you feel like you need a necessary break, it is okay to take that break. So last week, that's what it was for me. But the workshop was phenomenal. Again, a brand new group of women that I had not been familiar with attended. There might have been 3 people that I had relationships with that were there. So it's always really exciting for me when I get to meet all of you, because I know that we engage a lot on social media, via Instagram, via emails, but there's something so special about being able to be in the same space, to share your energy, to give you a hug, to really connect, because that's really what it is about for me. I am really big on that human connection, and while so many of these coaches are out there and they're in this industry because they need to make a living, as do I. But for me, it's more than just the monetary value that is attached to my coaching sessions or my workshops or my events. For me, it's just so much more important to build that relationship. And many of you know, those of you that have been following me for years, we have built friendships off of this work that I do. And it's important to me because I wholeheartedly believe that my sole purpose for being on this earth is to help others, to be of service, to share my experiences, my knowledge, my expertise with those of you who need it. And all of us have our own niche. We all have that one thing that we're really good at. And so even if you're sharing that within your own circle of friends or within your community, then that's your responsibility to do that. As we continue to grow, as we evolve, as we become wiser, as we have more experiences, and as we learn more about ourselves and about the world at large, we should be passing this knowledge down. That's the only way that we're going to continue to grow as a community and as a greater world at large. We have to have each other's backs. And I'm not saying that you have to sacrifice how you live or your ability to pay your bills and your expenses, because we all need money as a tool to live. But just also be aware that not everything has a monetary value. Sometimes you have to be willing to just share the knowledge because someone really needs to have it, and sometimes they may not be able to afford it. So it's about really maintaining that balance of how we can continue to live and thrive and pay our bills, but also how we're contributing to making someone else's life better and contributing to someone else's growth. And we have to figure out what that is individually, right? Because what works for me may not work for you. We have different responsibilities, we have different expenses, and while maybe I might be in a better position to offer a lot more services that are low cost or that are free, someone in a different position may not be able to do that. And that's understandable, but there are still ways where we can offer our services in a way that doesn't always require, like they say, quid pro quo, right? So you do for me, I do for you. Like there shouldn't always have to be an equal exchange. Again, we have to determine what that is for ourselves. But as you continue to grow on your own journey and you develop your own gifts, I want you to think about the ways you are going to pay that forward. Just something to think about. Because I promise you that the more you give, the more the universe gives back to you. There's just something about karma that I believe so much in. And so for me, I'm always thinking strategically on how I can create good karma for myself. So the workshop last week was all that and then some. These women were just so open. They really embraced one another. I mean, and this is true of all my workshops. Women come in as strangers. They really leave as friends. They have these connections. They have these bonds. I've seen them engaging afterward on social media. And so there's so much more that happens in these workshops than just the content that I'm teaching and the information that I'm sharing. It's how we share with one another and how we're able to see a piece of ourselves in another woman, and how we can take some of their experiences and see that no matter how difficult the road might be sometimes, that there really is a light at the end of the tunnel, that it isn't always that we're not always going to be covered in darkness. And so when we share our stories, we're sharing pieces of ourselves that inspire others to hope for a better future for themselves, to hope for better outcomes for whatever obstacle that they might be encountering at the moment. It also can inspire change, because sometimes all we need is to hear how someone else did it, so that we can take that same action. Because it's so hard to get to that end goal if we don't start, right? The hardest step is starting, but once you start, every subsequent step gets a little bit easier. And so some of the takeaways from last week's workshop that I got just from talking to every woman that was there, because I do make it a priority to connect with every single woman that steps foot into one of my workshops. And there were quite a few who had expressed to me that they really struggled with showing up. They were trying to make excuses for not coming. A lot of them had hung out the night before and they were either tired, exhausted, hungover, but they still pushed themselves. They realized the negative self-talk that was happening within them, and they decided to push past that. So one of the main takeaways that I got from the workshop, and as it relates to any new endeavor or initiative or goal that we set for ourselves, the first step is showing up. You have to show up for yourself. You have to be committed to yourself. If you say that you want to do something, and if you've invested money in it, because these women bought tickets, it's not like they were given the tickets for free. They spent money to be able to attend. So if you're spending money and if you're investing in yourself, then you have to show up. You owe it to yourself to show up. You don't owe it to the person that you paid to be there. You owe it to yourself. Because at the end of the day, whether you show up or not, that person has already made their money, right? So don't shortchange yourself just because you may not feel like it at the moment. Because feelings are fleeting, and you might feel tired 1 minute, but I guarantee you that if you get up, you take a shower, you wash your face, that feeling of tiredness will get washed away. So the first step is showing up. The second step is pushing back past those excuses. You can't let the excuses that you have conditioned yourself to say and to believe to dictate your life. Excuses are the killer of dreams. Okay, and I will tell you, I've struggled myself with excuses. I struggle with excuses right now because I hate working out. And even though my conscious mind knows that I need to commit more to my health, it's not about losing weight. It's about really getting healthy. It's about being cognizant about the types of food that I'm putting into my mouth. It's about me being aware about this addiction that I have to sugar. Like, it's all of these things. And I make excuses for this, even though I know that it's stopping me from becoming this healthier version of myself. And so I understand well when we make excuses. I understand well the concept of struggle and how that affects our ability to change our behaviors and really transform. So even though I do a lot of this transformation work, I'm human. And I still struggle with my own issues, but I try to, as best as I can, tackle them head on. I try to be creative in the ways that I do that. And you just have to do the same for yourself. And you have to get to a point where you find the way that works best for you. So even though you might find 1,000 ways that don't work, you have to keep trying until you find that one way that's going to work for you. The third takeaway that I got from last week's workshop was how we must trust the process and how we have to believe in the process. I assign homework prior to my workshops. And I know that for many who are first-time attendees to any of my events, it might strike them as odd or strange, or maybe this isn't something that they've done at other workshops that they've attended. But it's really important to me that the women and men that attend my workshops commit to themselves. And so me assigning the homework is really that first step in helping them commit to themselves. Because the ones who really want to change, the ones who truly want to transform, will try their best to complete the homework. And even if they don't complete all of it, the fact that they start and they complete some shows a different level of commitment from the person who doesn't even attempt to try it, from the person who from jump is giving the excuse. And I get it. I'm super busy. I'm just as busy as the next person. But I also know that when we really, really want something, there are no excuses that we can tell ourselves that are going to stop us from getting or doing or being that thing that we say we want. You know, for the person who really wants to change, there are no excuses. However, for the person that doesn't want to change, you can't convince them enough. There's nothing you could say that's going to convince them to want to change. You know, so that homework is really designed and built to get them started on the process of commitment. And a lot of times they don't understand it initially. They see it as a lot of work, but change requires work. If change was easy, everyone would be able to transform. But we know that is not. Change is hard, and it takes deliberate and intentional action every single day and making a different choice than what we have historically made. But in order to see the results of that, you have to trust the process. You have to trust me and the tools that I'm teaching you and the different methods of how to accomplish your goals that I'm showing you. You trust the process, you work the process, you put in the work, and the change will happen. I promise you that it will. And we also did a lot of self-reflection in the workshop. And I'm a big fan of self-reflecting because when we self-reflect, we allow ourselves to really dig deep into some of the choices that we made, why we made those choices, how we can make different choices in the future, what inspired that choice. You know, so being able to step back and really look at how we got to where we got can really help us make better decisions in the future and can guide us on a different path, because now we're able to see the different choices that we should have or could have made to get us a different result. But as always, you know, it was a phenomenal event, one that I encourage every person who is really seeking a transformation in their life, anyone who is really seeking to follow through on their goals, to really be committed. If this is you and you have yet to attend one of my workshops, I have one last workshop coming up March 23rd. This time we will be in Queens. And it'll be in the afternoon. I think that's a Saturday from 2 to 5 p.m. Don't quote me. All of the details are on the website. And if you'd like to purchase your ticket, you can buy your ticket at www.gamechangers, with an S, 2019.eventbrite.com. And you can purchase your ticket there. This workshop is open to both men and women. So if you're a woman listening, you can feel free to purchase a ticket for your spouse, your boyfriend, your son, a nephew, any male who you think would benefit from strategic goal setting, and for women as well. So if you're interested, if you have a daughter that might be interested, a niece, a friend, anyone, plug them in, and I'd love to see you there. It's always a great time, and I never really know what's going to happen in my workshops because every group of people is different, and I always go off of the energy in the room. But you will leave with something that you didn't know, and you will leave with an actual game plan for helping you accomplish your goals for this year. Another thing I wanted to share on this podcast was I wanted to congratulate former guest Raygrid Calderon on the grand opening of her new spiritual wellness center, which opened this past Saturday. Spiritually Sparkled is now open for business. So if you are seeking anything within the realm of spiritual wellness, then this is the spot for you. They offer Reiki, yoga, meditation, spiritual readings, and they also offer event space rental. So if you are in the business of hosting workshops or events like I am, they have a beautiful space for rental. So make sure that you reach out to Raygrid. And I think their website is spirituallysparkle.com. But if not, you can always hit her up at her Instagram, and her name is at Raygrid. Really simple and easy. Tell her that Nancy sent you. And then lastly, for I guess kind of keep you updated on what I've been doing. This past week, I shot for a new web series that is being directed by one of my good friends who I've known for more than 10 years. We came up together on the poetry scene. She's a fellow writer who has now turned into filmmaker. And she's starting a new web series called A Moment TV. And really what the series is, it's about featuring individuals who have inspiring stories or who are doing amazing work within their communities. And so I was asked to be the first feature. And what really made this special for me was that we got to go back to my old neighborhood and really shoot in Williamsburg, where I grew up. And there were just so many memories that came flooding back to me as I stood on the steps of my childhood home where I grew up, 454 Bedford Avenue, as I was able to traverse the streets of the playground that I used to play in. I thought a lot about my Uncle Rene, who passed last year, and how he influenced me in so many ways. And I was so overwhelmed with emotion that I started crying, and it was so unexpected because I was not prepared for the feelings that were going to be brought up in me as a result of this. I talked a lot about, my family life with my kids. I talked about my husband. I talked about the work that I do. I even talked about growing up in Williamsburg, but being there physically and kind of walking those streets just added a different layer to that. And so I'm really excited. I can't wait until the completed project drops and I can share it with you guys. But I say all that to say that going back to the old neighborhood really forced me to think about my childhood and about the many ways growing up in Brooklyn formed who I became. And not just who I am today, but who I became as a teenager, who I became when I was in my 20s, who I became when I was in my 30s. And for a lot of my years, I felt that I had to be this really tough, hardcore individual. And a lot of those behaviors that I had learned or that I had mimicked or that I had seen others display were really self-sabotaging behaviors. And for a really long time, I was dysfunctional and I was destroying my life with the choices and the decisions that I was making just because I didn't know any better. And not that I didn't know any better, but I wasn't taught the proper way to handle certain situations. And so, right when I started getting into my healing work, it wasn't only until then, 2011, that I realized just how much childhood trauma I had been carrying with me. And one of the things that always kind of comes up when I'm working with my coaching clients is these things that we carry with us from our childhood, things that we bury, things that we tell ourselves, oh, I'm just going to let it go, or that we don't think about, and we think that we've resolved them, but we have not. And I said this week to one of my clients. I said, anything that still triggers you in any way is a part of yourself that requires healing. And it is up to you to dig into that, to understand why it's so triggering to you, and then do the necessary work to heal that wound, whatever it is. And even for myself today, when I find that I'm easily triggered by someone or something, I immediately step back and I ask myself, what part of me needs more work? Why is this so triggering for me? Why am I getting so bothered? Why am I getting so worked up? Why am I getting so angry? Why does this hurt me so much? So if you're feeling any of those things when it comes to any person, any situation, any experience, then you have to ask yourself, what part of yourself is this coming from? What part of yourself is hurt that is allowing that thing to trigger you in that way? And the minute you start identifying those triggers and start working towards healing them, the better equipped you will be as you start working towards creating a better life for yourself. A lot of times when we're unable to stick with our goals or when we're unable to follow through on a lot of things, that's because there's something within us underlying that we haven't delved into yet, but there's something in there that has conditioned our minds to self-sabotage ourselves. And one of the things I have to say is that when it comes to following our dreams and doing the things that we're more passionate about, we're our own worst enemy. There really isn't anyone or anything that stops us from going after our dreams. In the end, it's us. We can convince ourselves that it's other people or we don't have enough money or resources or whatever excuses we give ourselves. But in the end, no one is responsible for our actions or inactions other than ourselves. We fill our brains with so much negative self-talk that what happens is we eventually begin to believe that. We begin to believe that we're not worthy enough, we're not deserving enough, we're not capable enough, we're not pretty enough or skinny enough or whatever enough, right? We tell ourselves that we're not enough for whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. And what we don't realize is that that inner voice or the words that we're speaking to ourselves, either consciously or subconsciously, has a direct impact on how we see ourselves and how we navigate through the world. And so the more you talk about negative things in your life, the more of that you attract. And I have seen it with real life examples of people in my life. And you might know someone like that. You might know a person who all they do is talk negatively, or maybe they seem so miserable and they can never see the joy and beauty in anything. And all of their life is just a reflection of that negativity and that misery. And that's not by coincidence. Because conversely, when we see people who are happy and living their best lives, right, the words that they're speaking to themselves are different. These happy people are not talking negatively to themselves. They're not saying what they can't do. They're telling themselves what they can do and then following through with that. So you, me, all of us, whenever we find ourselves in that space where we're talking negatively or where we're even entertaining negative thoughts, we have to nip that in the bud quickly. We have to immediately cut off that negative thought and replace it with something positive. Because if you want success, if you want wisdom, if you want to be prosperous and healthy, you must confidently declare words of faith and victory over yourself and your family. Words have power. You have to change your inner voice. You have to. And I know that for some of us that might be hard because maybe all of our lives, all we've ever heard was negativity. Maybe our parents, all they ever said to us was, you're not going to amount to anything. You're useless. You're stupid. You're not worthy. And the things that our parents and our caregivers and the people closest to us speak to us as children, that's what becomes our inner voice. And so maybe now you're an adult and you're a grown up, and so you still have that same inner voice. Well, I will tell you something. You don't have to carry that inner voice with you for the rest of your life. You at this very moment have the power to change what that inner voice is saying to you. And you change that by the words that you speak to yourself. Even if as you speak them about yourself, you don't believe them, but the same way those negative words were spoken to you over and over and over again as a child, and you believed those words, I need you now to change those negative words into positive words and continue to speak those positive words to yourself until you believe those words. Not only for you, but for those around you, because every word you speak produces an effect in yourself and in others. The truth of the matter is that your words send out an energy that creates a reaction in others, right? So if you're speaking positivity, whoever is the recipient of that is going to receive positive vibration, positive energy. They're going to want to be around you. Just the same way, if you speak negative words and negativity and misery, ain't nobody going to want to be around that. I know I definitely don't want to. I only want to be surrounded by people who are positive and who are talking, they're affirming positive things about themselves and about me and about the world. You have to be responsible for the energy you put out into the world and for the energy that you surround yourself with. Because as I said, your energy, whatever you put out there, tends to be what you get back. You awaken in others the attitudes you hold in yourself. You change your attitude, you change your reality. And so today I want you to think about the words you say to yourself. What are the messages you're consciously or subconsciously telling yourself and sending to others? If the success or failure of the whole entire world depended on who you were and what you said, what words would you speak? Think about that for a second. If the success or failure of the entire world depended on who you were and what you said, what would those words be? What would you speak? What would you put out into the universe? How do the words you say to yourself influence the type of day you have? And I want you to really be honest with yourself. And I get it. Every single day is not going to be positive. It's not going to be sunny. It's not going to be rosy, right? Because life happens. But I tell you that if you wake up every single morning with a grateful attitude, no matter what life throws at you that day, you will be able to get through that. I want you to think about this for a second. I want you to think about the words. I want you to think about how your energy is influencing the day that you're having and your interactions with other people. And ask yourself, are you constantly saying, I'm not enough? I can't do this, or this. There's no way they'll ever choose me. And then ask yourself, why is it that it's easier for you to believe the negative talk you tell yourself than it is to believe the positive? Where is that belief stemming from? And I really want you to take some time to think about these questions. And like I told you in the beginning of this podcast, you should have had a pen and pad with you, right? And if you need to kind of rewind and jot these questions down, I encourage you to do that. It's going to open up that self-reflection process that I was talking about in the beginning of this podcast. Write your responses down in a notebook or in a journal and reflect on them. And then once you've done that, I want you to write down the following, and I want you to say these affirmations to yourself every single day, because we're going to stop this self-sabotaging behavior today. We are no longer going to talk ourselves out of the greatness that is awaiting us, the success that is awaiting us, the health that is awaiting us, the happiness that is awaiting us. We're no longer going to sabotage ourselves. We are going to be open to receiving everything great that this universe has for us. So starting today, I want you to say, I am releasing every self-doubt, every non-affirming thought, and anything that isn't contributing to my greater good. Today, I am enough. And I trust that as I love and care for myself, the universe will reward me in kind. Everything I need to be successful is already within me. I am a child of God, and that alone makes me worthy. And the last one, definitely not least, I have nothing to prove to anyone. I want you to write these down, put them on Post-its, post them around your cubicle at work, post them around your house, post them in your car, jot them down and put them as your screensaver on your phone. But I need you to start changing that inner voice and the narrative that you are telling yourself. Because your world depends on who you are and the words you speak. So please start being kind to yourself. And with that, my loves, I am going to end this week's episode of the Empowerment Hour podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating, leave us a review. Make sure that you have subscribed, share this podcast with your networks and with your friends. And just remember, transformation doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice. Every day, choose yourself. So until next time, mi gente, go out there and crush those goals.